feel like you're constantly battling sugar cravings or feel really tired or moody or maybe just overwhelmed and unable to focus? Do you feel like you're constantly snapping at your family? If you said yes to any of these, you are not alone. And what I tend to hear from a lot of women and from my moms is that it must be a problem with my willpower. It must be my motivation. That's why I can't stop eating cookies or eating the sugar. Or I feel really bad that I'm snapping at my family, but like I cannot help it. I just react and that's what comes out. Or there's something wrong with my brain. Like I cannot focus no matter what I do. And so what I want to let you in on a little secret is that this isn't a problem with motivation. It's not a problem with willpower, and you're not just bitchy. What's likely going on is that you're going through a hormonal imbalance. And so that's why today we're really going to look at your stress hormones 101. So if we've never met before, I'm Dr. Lauren Hungler. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I have a family practice in the south end of Guelph. And really, I'm on a mission to help women and to help my moms feel healthy as fuck, meaning you've got the motivation to pick and choose and eat the foods that you need to exercise, to not feel like you're a slave to your couch and to Netflix, to really take ownership of your life so we can get the shit done to make you feel your best and really get you back to feeling awesome and feeling like yourself. So we've been going over a lot of energy hacks lately. And so what I wanted to focus on is the idea that we've looked at digestion, we've looked at hydration, we've looked at a little bit about diet and about movement. What we're going to focus on today is we're really going to be looking at stress and your adrenal glands. So what is stress? So stress is really just the body's way of responding to any kind of demand. That can be physical, mental, emotional. And each time you're under that type of stress, your body has a very specific physiological and hormonal reaction that occurs. So really we want to know who's in charge of this. So your HPA, or your hypothalamic pituitary axis, is how hormones receive and transmit information. So when you're under stress, your hypothalamus will release CRH, or corticotropin releasing hormone. And then that stimulates your anterior pituitary, which is basically just another kind of like phone call to say like, hey, we need some action here. And you release ACTH, or adrenocorticotropin releasing hormone. That goes down, and that's what stimulates your adrenal glands, which are going to be two little glands that sit on top of your kidneys. And their main job is to produce cortisol in response to stress. And so when we talk about stress and the physiological and the hormonal responses that happen with that, we want to talk about the fight or flight response. So fight or flight is looking at all the physiological happenings that occur when you're in that state. So we always talk about the idea of like running away from a bear. So if you were running away from a bear, you'd have increased heart rate, you'd have increased blood pressure and blood flow, because we need to get oxygen and nutrients to your muscles and to your brain to keep you strong, focused, and on point. You get lots of sugar released into the system as well, because we need free glucose and energy to be able to be in that protection stage. Your pupils dilate so you can see where you're running. All non-essential systems are also shut down because there's no peeing and pooing when we're running away from a bear. So your digestion slows, metabolism slows as well. And your libido would shrink too, because there's no sexy time when you're running away from a bear. So all these things consistently happen when you're under stress. And so in a short burst of stress, it can be really protective. The problem is that most of us are under really long-term stress for big periods of time. So we're no longer running away from a bear or scavenging for food or trying to find shelter. What we're doing now is we have a lot of mental and emotional worries and fears. So maybe that's work projects. Maybe that's homeschooling right now. Maybe that's trying to organize groceries for the next week or two, trying to pick out the foods, make a meal plan, do all the cooking, being in charge of finances. Like we have so many different hats. And I tend to find that as women, we all try to do them perfectly. So does this sound familiar to anyone? Unfortunately, this is long-term stress, and the body is not a big fan. And so what we want to look at are maybe the 3 phases that we can go into when it comes to stress. So we have our alarm phase, and that's really considered like your normal phase. That's what your body is used to doing. It means you go in and out of stressful situations transiently. So maybe that's you were up all night with a sick kid and you didn't sleep for 1 or 2 nights, or maybe you had a really big work project this past month. And so you've been working really, really hard, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. Your body will respond with that hyped up energy and hyped up focus and concentration. And usually you can get over this in about 1 to 2 days. You'll feel right back to normal and won't feel drained and exhausted. The next one is called tired but wired. which is an interesting one and one I find a lot of people are in. So tired but wired is looking at, you've been in your alarm phase for a bit of a longer or chronic term. So during this phase, your body's just constantly bombarded with really high cortisol. So what happens is that you start to feel more exhausted when you wake up in the morning. You also, when you go to bed, you feel tired, but you're wired, meaning that you feel tired, but your brain just can't turn off and you can't fall asleep. You tend to start seeking out caffeine, sugar, and salty options to kind of like keep you awake and keep you on point. Your sleepy hormone melatonin is messed up in this situation as well. And so you start to experience multiple times waking at night, especially between 2 and 4 a.m. The next phase is when we're in the tired but wired, and then we're in that for chronic and long term. We're looking at like 3 to 6 months or even kind of years for some people. And this is called burnout phase. And so burnout phase is really where the adrenals have basically started to say like a little bit of a screw you kind of experience. So they've kind of stop responding and they start resisting signals from your brain, and your ability to deal with stress is severely diminished. So as soon as like one more stressor or one more priority starts to come onto your lap, you feel totally overwhelmed. You might even start to experience some anxiety, maybe even exhaustion. And then the cravings ramp right up, and you might even start to notice some weight gain as well. So what's going on here is something called adrenal fatigue. And in a nutshell, like after maintaining those really high levels of cortisol for a really long time, your adrenal glands just stop responding. They're fatigued. They're literally tired. They want a break. They want a vacation, and they can't cope with stress anymore. So your ability to handle stresses and your ability to respond are severely limited. And so you'll start to see a lot of mood swings and feelings of overwhelm. So one thing we need to identify is like, is this you? So what I call this little segment is called shit your adrenals say. So this could be something, and everyone, it's from person to person, it depends. It depends what phase you're really in and what you're experiencing. But these tend to be common statements that I hear a lot when we're experiencing adrenal issues. So the first one is going to be, I can't fall asleep at night, or I constantly wake up, and it's always, if I look at the clock, it's between 2 and 4 a.m. So what happens here is that under chronic stress, the natural rise and fall of your cortisol is out of whack. So usually in the morning, your cortisol should rise. And then as we get into the evening, it starts to diminish. What goes on is if you are go, go, go all day, from like the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, your cortisol is elevated into the evening. And so what happens there is that it stops melatonin from being produced appropriately. And what we want to remember is that if our cortisol is really high, this is our protection hormone. You're not going to be able to fall asleep. You're supposed to be running from a friggin' bear. So what your body does is it makes you go into more of a lighter sleep. So really, anything makes you feel like you can wake up. You feel like a really light sleeper. You wake up at the slightest sounds, or you constantly wake up between 2 and 4 a.m. is a really common time. The other one is, I feel like I'm getting sleep, but when I wake up in the morning, I am bloody exhausted. And this is similar to the reason in the previous one, is that you can't fall asleep and you can't wake up because of problems with that normal cycling of cortisol and melatonin. So your body is really, really smart, and it registers the fact that cortisol has been really high over time. So what the body does is that it reduces how much is produced during the day in an attempt to conserve it. So if you're waking up and you're feeling really exhausted, it's because cortisol levels are lower than where they actually should be. And so you don't feel ready for the day, and you actually feel more tired. When's my next coffee? Is it coffee? Is it coffee time yet? So now when you're feeling exhausted, you've woken up, you still need to have the energy to get through your day and to feel on point. And so what we tend to do is we try to search out other alternatives to increase our cortisol. And so that tends to be coffee and caffeine. Coffee and caffeine can increase your cortisol levels. So it can make you feel energized and on point. But what happens is that this just leads to a really vicious cycle, because you're constantly searching out that like next caffeine hit to make you feel better and to give you that energy that you need, because your cortisol just isn't there to do it for you. I've been eating really well, but I feel like my weight just keeps creeping up, and it's really right around my tummy. And so this is a really common one, especially when it comes to weight. So during times of stress, as we talked about, and cortisol release, your body increases the amount of sugar into your blood, because ideally you're going to be using those sugars and those energy sources to run away from a bear and to to be in that protection mode. The problem is that if we're worrying about finances, or we're stressed about homeschooling, or we're trying to figure out our grocery list, usually we're not using a lot of energy when we're doing those things. And so the body releases all this sugar in response to the stress hormones, but it doesn't have anywhere to go. And so what your body does is like, well, I'll take that and I'll pack it away for a rainy day. And so we tend to pack it away as fat. And so your body will tend to accumulate a bit more belly fat, especially around the midsection. Not our favorite. Just need some sugar, just a little sugar, maybe in the afternoon or in the evening are the most common times. And so what I really want to drill down is, this is not about willpower. It's not that you're unmotivated. It's that you're experiencing sugar cravings and for like carbohydrates, muffins, and cookies, because the elevated cortisol over time, it increases the cravings for those foods. If our cortisol is really high, your body assumes that you need free, quick energy to utilize. So it creates those cravings because it wants you to consume those high octane foods to give you the energy that it needs. I feel snappy at my partner, at my kids, and I just feel like my mood is on a roller coaster. I feel like I'm overly emotional, or I feel bitchy. That's a big one too. So once stress has been high enough over a long enough time, the adrenals start to experience that burnout that we talked about, and they start to just resist any signals from the brain. And so your ability to respond to just one more thing, so if that's, I need one more snack, or oh honey, we're is okay if we do laundry tonight, even just like some things where you can't have anything else on your plate or on your shoulders, you feel really overwhelmed, and your ability to handle any of that stress is just, it's negligible. It's just not there. And so part of what happens there is that when we start to experience that burnout, we start to get into feelings of more anxiety, and could even lead into depression and overwhelm. So it's not you're not just bitchy, you may have a hormonal imbalance. And the last one is, my stomach feels off. I just feel bloated or gassy, or my bowel movements have been wild. And this can really be that leaky gut scenario, in that stress and cortisol have a really negative impact on our gut health, and actually increase the leakiness or the hyperpermeability of our gut, and can create that reduced digestibility and reduced absorption of our nutrients, and cause lots of gas, bloating, low energy, low focus. And so we start to kind of get this cyclical nature when it comes to digestion and hormones. And there you have it. That's the shit your adrenals say. So what I want you to do is to think about, like, what phase might I be in? Am I in an alarm phase? Am I in a tired but wired phase? Or am I in burnout phase? Because we need to know where you're at to figure out what we need to do to help to support you. We can do testing, which is really fantastic. There are hormone tests, either salivary or urinary, that we can use to kind of figure out where your hormones are actually sitting. And because we need to know what's happening. How bad is it is really what we're trying to figure out. So figuring out the phase that you're in and trying to discern whether or not your adrenals are playing a part. So what I'd love for you to do is, if you know a mom or you know of a woman who could really use the help and support of our community, I'd love for you to share our Healthy as Fuck Facebook page with them, because it's really going to be a place where we can support each other to really optimize our health as women. And if you need more support, I'm here. We need to figure this out. We need to stop saying it's motivation, it's willpower. We need to figure out where your hormones are at, how we can get them balanced, and how we can get you supported to feel your best. So until next time, I will see you then. Bye now.